Zuri woke up in a bed that wasn't hers.
Silk sheets.
A man's shirt on her body, and no memory of how she got there.
Her dress was gone.
Her head was pounding. And the room. The room belonged to the billionaire she cleaned for every day. She had only wanted one night. One night to pretend she was powerful, desired, and chosen. The masquerade party made it easy for her to pretend. But she never planned on starting something with her boss. By the time she slipped out of the room, she thought it was over. She was wrong. Because when he saw her at breakfast, he didn't ask who she was. He already knew. Before we go any further, this is Life Tale Stories. If you love intense romance, women who choose their fate, and stories that make you cheer for the characters, tap subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get into Zuri's story. Zuri Carlton learned how to disappear without leaving. She was still there in the room, but people's eyes slid past her like she belonged to the walls. Trays in, trays out. Linens folded. Counters wiped until they gleamed for the exquisite, impeccable tastes of the owners of the estate. But to Zuri, that was fine because she was preoccupied with something else, daydreaming. While sauces simmered or plates lined up just right, she imagined something else entirely. Plazas with faces turned toward her, a luxurious car, and an award given to her under the limelight. Acting was something that had started as play when she was younger, but it never really went away. Pretending and escaping to a made-up world was easy. Living in her reality was not. Zuri was good doing her job and fantasizing at the same time, especially when he was around.
Tae-kyu.
Billionaire and heir to the Lee conglomerate. The current owner of the Lee estate where she worked. Tae-kyu moved through the estate like a fixed point, composed and untouchable. Zuri, like other staff, avoided looking at him directly because getting his attention was dangerous. But sometimes, when she was sure he wasn't paying attention to his environment, she let the thoughts drift to her secret wonderland. Him noticing, him stopping, him seeing her. She never believed it would happen. Fantasy was safest when it stayed where no one could reach it. But that morning, something shifted for Zuri. "You're off tomorrow," the head maid said, already halfway down the corridor. Zuri blinked. Off.
Yes.
Consider it compensation for the ruckus these past days. A pause followed, brief, but pointed. "Don't worry, you're not the only one lucky to get an off day." Zuri stood there long after the head maid disappeared, trying to remember the last time she'd had an off day. Trying to imagine what people did with free hours that weren't borrowed. Later, in the staff corridor, voices carried about the major event that was happening the tomorrow night. The masquerade party. Every part of the estate had been in a quiet tension as preparations grew tighter and more aggressive and less lenient with mistakes. Masquerade. The word clicked in Zuri's heart. A night to pretend. A night where no one knows who you are. Just one night, she reasoned. Just for fun. She could be anyone. Her off day came as any other. The only difference was that she didn't have to change into her uniform. A uniform she had worn for the past 2 years. She sat down on her bed, in a single room that was allocated to her in the servants' quarters. It would be a good idea to leave the estate, she thought. Instead, she pulled out a dress she had kept hidden for years. Long ago, when she was audacious to believe that no dream was too small. Back when she believed nothing was impossible. The dress took more courage than it cost money. It was red, deep, and liquid. It still fit her like it had been waiting for its chance, hugged her waist, skimmed her hips, fell clean over her calves and to her ankles. The neckline was simple, almost modest, which somehow made it worse. When she moved, the fabric followed, like it already knew the part she planned to play. Reaching for another box, Zuri pulled out a yellow mask that covered more than half her face.
Perfect.
Now, the first step was done. Next was hair and makeup. By the time she was done, night had fallen and Zuri barely recognized herself. Confidence settled in a way that startled her. The woman in the mirror didn't scrub counters or keep her eyes down. She looked like someone who belonged wherever she decided to stand. Just tonight, Zuri told herself again as she slipped out from the quarters unseen. The huge doors opened. Light spilled out. Music. Laughter brushing against skin. Zuri stepped inside and felt it immediately, the shift. Like the floor had tilted, just enough to change everything. No one asked for an invitation card. No one questioned her. A maid offered her a drink. Mia, her colleague. But there was no flash of recognition in Mia's eyes as Zuri took the drink from the tray.
Perfect.
She was unrecognizable. A smile curved on her lips as she relaxed. But across the room, Tae-kyu lifted his head, his peripheral view catching a red glimmering light. No, not a light. A woman. In red. Someone unfamiliar. She was alone. Uninvited, but she moved like she belonged. Something stirred within him.
Curiosity and something else.
And that alone was enough for him to approach her. Zuri felt him before she saw him. Her boss, Tae-kyu. His suit was sharp as ever and he wore no mask, breaking his own rule for the party. A shift in the room as he approached her. He didn't say anything as he dropped a glass of wine on the table stand before her. He merely stood a few steps beside her in silence, scanning the room. "You look like someone who doesn't get invited often," he said lightly after a while, as if testing the ground between them. His gaze directly on her. Her heart pounded as she struggled to keep her nerves in control.
Stay. In. Character.
She repeated to herself. Zuri smiled as she replied, her voice filled with fake confidence. "And you look like someone who thinks invitations decide who belongs." Something flickered behind his mask. Interest sharpened into something else. His lips curling as he turned to face her. Conversation slipped into place, as though they were past buddies who were meeting after years apart. Easy and light. Zuri offered half-truths wrapped in ease. He responded with charm that never tried too hard. When she teased him, his mouth curved. Something she had never seen when working as a maid. When he challenged her, she didn't retreat. She leaned in just enough to make him wonder. "What do you do?" he asked later, voice lower now, closer. She tilted her head, considering the truth she couldn't afford to give. "I pretend." A soft laugh escaped him before he could stop it. "That's dangerous." "So is boredom." He watched her longer this time. "So, an upcoming actress?" "Maybe," she said, mischief dwindling in her eyes. They drank, slowly. When other guests needed his attention, they met him, not the other way around. He stood beside her all night, his focus never drifting from her. Guests threw curious glances towards her, but she never wavered. Zuri tried to control her emotions, to keep it down, but it felt like her fantasies were finally coming true, and she wasn't going to stop it. Not this night. When his fingers brushed hers, it wasn't accidental, it lingered. She didn't pull away. The atmosphere charging between them. "You know," he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath warmed her ear. "I've been trying to figure you out all night." Her heart stumbled. And you're not what you say you are." She smiled softly. "It's the perks of being an actress. People find it difficult to believe what's true." She looked at him as she asked, "But does it matter?" Tae-kyu took a sip before replying, "Maybe not."
The music changed.
The room felt lighter, but Zuri's chest grew tighter from anticipation. When he offered his arm, she took it without hesitation as they walked side by side.
It was decided then.
She would go all in this night, and when it was over, it would become nothing but a cherished memory. Everything was in place. She knew the estate like the back of her hand. So, when it was time for her escape, she would disappear into the night. But Zuri never anticipated just how deep the ground the hole she dug would be. Zuri woke with a sharp inhale. White ceiling.
Cool air.
Sheets too soft to be hers. Her heart raced as memory returned in fragments. Warm hands, low laughter, the thrill of being believed. For one dangerous second, she imagined staying. Then reality crashed in. This was his room. Her boss's room. She sat up quickly, the bed empty beside her, but the dip and warmth suggested he hadn't been gone for long.
No mask. No shoes.
The red gown was gone. Panic stripped her movements of grace. Her plans of escape all in shambles. She wasn't supposed to remove her mask, but passion had won. "I want to see all of you," he had whispered as she held her close. Shaking the memory off, Zuri dressed in her boss' oversized dress shirt and slipped out before the house fully woke. She vanished into the corridors that knew her too well and into her maid's room. The dream was over. She was back to reality. By breakfast, Zuri was invisible again. She was back in her maid uniform and unflattering hairstyle. Simple, blank, unnoticeable. But somehow, she felt something was about to change. The maids lined up on against the wall, heads bowed low as Tae-kyu entered the dining room, walking towards the table that was filled with food. His mood was off this morning. The lady he had spent the night with was nowhere to be found by the time he had returned. The guards all admitted to not seeing anyone leave in the early hours. The cameras supported their claims, and that only added to his frustrations. Then something tugged at him, a scent, memory, instinct tightening into focus. His gaze swept the servants once. Then he stopped and zeroed in on one person. "You," he started. The room went still. "What's your name?" A sharp nudge at her rib pulled Zuri back into reality. Tae-kyu's gaze was on her. Her gaze dropped to the floor as she answered, her heart pounding. "Zuri, sir." He repeated it once, slowly, as if tasting the sound of it. "You may all leave," Tae-kyu said as he settled into his chair, watching all the maids leave. Later, alone, he ordered the footage from the party night and watched the night unfold again. Every look, every step, the curve of her lips, her skin. He had memorized every part of her. Then, he reflected on the way she elegantly skirted around his questions. A smile touched his mouth as he watched on. He had discovered something very interesting. Zuri knew before she was summoned. It wasn't instinct this time, it was the way the house tightened around her. Voices lowered and eyes lingered and slid away too quickly. "Mr. Lee wants to see you right now," the head administrator said to her later that day, in his office. Her stomach dipped. "I'll be there," she replied. The office was cool and luxurious, like one belonging to someone of his status. Tae-kyu stood by the window when she entered, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He didn't turn right away. "Close the door," he commanded. She did as he asked, her fingers trembling slightly. The silence stretched between them, her heart pounding loudly within her. "Are you a spy?" he asked after a period of tense silence. Zuri blinked and looked up. "Sir? You were at the masquerade party," he stated, finally turning around. "You told me your name was Arya. You lied about who you were. You slept in my bed. And this morning, you served my breakfast." He spoke with finality and 100% confidence. He knew. Her pulse roared in her ears. She could have denied it, could have pretended ignorance. The actress in her knew the lines. But something in his gaze warned her not to. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not a spy." "Then explain." She inhaled, steadying herself. I wanted to be someone else for one night. I didn't mean any harm. It was just," she stopped, searching for a word that wouldn't sound foolish. "A fantasy." His jaw tightened, not with anger, but with something sharper. "A fantasy," he repeated. "Yes." He studied her for a long moment. Not her uniform, not her lowered gaze. Her. As if peeling layers back, testing what was real underneath. "You enjoyed fooling me," he said. The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong.
"No."
"It wasn't about you," she answered. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, quickly masked. He nodded once, decision settling. "Good," he said as he approached her. "If you enjoy pretending," he continued evenly, "then you'll do it properly." Her breath caught. "Sir." "You'll play the role I choose for you," he continued as her eyes widened. "You will be my mistress." The words hung heavy between them. His smile widened into a wicked one as he drew closer to her. "I won't let you go," he added, his voice low. "Not until I'm sick of you." Her pulse skidded. Fear threaded with something else. Heat, unwanted, and undeniable. This was wrong. She knew it. It felt her. He wanted to punish her for deceiving him. And yet deep down, she wanted it. His gaze and voice left no room for arguments or choice. "Yes, sir," she said, eyes lowering. His lips curved to slow smile. "Good," he said again, his fingers grazing her hair slowly. Then down her neck. "I'll make sure you never forget who you belong to." Then his lips landed on her. Not soft, not rough. It was filled with desire and want. By evening, the whole estate knew. Tae-kyu had taken an interest in a maid. Whispers followed. Curiosity sharpened into envy. Zuri moved through it like a ghost wrapped in silk, heart hammering. That night, alone in the room he'd assigned her, she sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her palms to her thighs. She shouldn't want this, but her body said otherwise. By the way, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing our Lifetale family from around the world. Zuri learned quickly that being kept was not the same as being held. Some evenings, he had her sit beside him while he worked, the quiet stretching until it pressed against her ribs. Other nights, he spoke just enough to remind her he was aware of every breath she took. "You're calmer than the woman I met at the party," he said once, not looking up. "Why is that?" She stilled as she answered. "I was pretending. This is me.
Quiet.
Boring. Uninteresting." He smiled faintly. "I don't think so." Looking at her, he added, "I think you're just suppressing your real nature. I, for one, know the real you in bed." Zuri's face reddened, but she couldn't deny his words. 2 weeks later, and Zuri had settled into her role. Most times, it didn't feel like a role she was playing, and she suspected it felt the same for Tae-kyu. A hand at her lower back as he passed. His voice near her ear, warm and unhurried. The way he said her name like it was something he owned and something he was still deciding how to use. She told herself she would stop wanting this. She told herself she would ask for an end. She didn't. Because she liked it. Because some part of her had always wanted to be seen like this, even if it scared her. But sooner than she'd like, Zuri would see that sometimes what you want isn't what's best. The first crack in her fantasy world came quietly. One evening, Zuri was pushing a tea cart towards the private dining room, a smile on her lips. It was time for Tae-kyu's evening tea, and also the time when they wind down and talk about silly things. As time went on, he had become more human than a powerful, intimidating figure to her. "I won't take no for an answer, Tae-kyu." A voice filtered through the air. Feminine.
Sharp.
Authoritative. Zuri stopped in her tracks and listened. She stood a few steps away from the entrance. "After the meetup with Chairman Go's daughter, we can begin your wedding preparations." Zuri took in a sharp breath. Her mouth went to her lips as shock flooded her. "How many times do I have to tell you I have someone, mother? Moreover, I won't succumb to marrying for your benefit. This is the life you were born into. You have no choice. Concerning that person, you should end it. Chairman Go is very protective of his daughter." "I cannot end it," he replied. "Oh, I know it's not for a silly reason like love."
So, why not?
"There's a baby on the way, and I don't intend on doing anything that will upset the mother and child." Outside, Zuri's brow furrowed as her hands went to her belly. But she wasn't pregnant. Before she could act, the sound of footsteps grew louder. The air shifted as the door swung open. Tae-kyu's mother stood near the doorway, elegant and still, her gaze moving with practiced ease. She didn't address Zuri. She only looked her over with a sharp gaze. Not curious. Assessing. "So," she said to her son who was standing behind her. "This is she?" Zuri's fingers tightened around the tea cart handle. Tae-kyu didn't correct her. "Yes." His mother's eyes flicked back to Zuri, lingering a moment too long. "You must think you have made it, now that you're bearing a child for an affluent man," she said lightly. "But don't get too comfortable. You never know how fast everything can be ripped from under you." Then she turned and walked away. Tae-kyu stood by the door, his eyes on Zuri, and not his mother. Tae-kyu, she called, her voice low. You lied. I'm not, she swallowed. I'm not pregnant. Lee leaned closer, his breath on hers as he cupped her jaw. That means we ought to try harder to make it true, don't we? He winked at her, a dangerous smile on his lips. He gave her a kiss on the lips before moving to follow after his mother. And that night, Lee Tae-kyu made sure to show Zuri the ways his little lie would become true. Zuri paid no mind to Tae-kyu's mother words, but sometimes she felt she should have. The reality of Tae-kyu's world followed sooner than she expected. Dinner was familiar and comfortable. Halfway through, Zuri's mouth grew numb. The taste of her food felt wrong. She set the spoon down, frowning at her meal. As she reached for a cup of water, the room tilted. Her heart pounded as panic flooded her. Her chair scraped as she stood too quickly. The edges of the world blurred. She tried to open her mouth to speak, but it felt too heavy. She didn't hit the floor. Lee Tae-kyu was there, his hand firm at her elbow, his voice low and immediate. You need to spit it out.
Now.
Everything else happened at once.
Doctors.
Questions. Quiet orders. Zuri woke with a pounding head and the steady pressure of his fingers around her wrist, grounding her. I'm sorry, I should have warned you, he murmured. What happened? His jaw tightened. You were poisoned. I'm not sure if it was meant for you or for me. Zuri's eye widened. Does this happen often? He looked at her. The silence was enough answer. Zuri swallowed as a question hounded her mind. Could she survive in his world? Few days later, alone in the bathroom, Zuri leaned over the sink as nausea rolled through her again, softer now, persistent. Her hands shook as she stared at her reflection.
No, she thought.
Not this. She reached for the pregnancy test strip anyway. The results stared back at her. 2 lines. Zuri slid down against the wall, breath leaving her in a rush. Her eyes were finally opened to how dangerous his world was. Far gone was her bubble of fantasy. This was reality, and she had to decide if she was going to continue living in it. The message arrived next week. From an unknown number. Mrs. Lee would like to see you. The time and place accompanied the text, demanding, full of expectations, and no chance to say no. Zuri stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. She didn't tell Lee Tae-kyu. She told herself it was because she wanted to handle it alone. She didn't admit the other reason, that she was afraid of what would happen if he came. The restaurant was luxurious, but quiet.
Private.
The kind of place where conversations that the world would never hear were had. Mrs. Lee was already seated. Sit, she said calmly. Zuri did. For a while, the older woman spoke of neutral things, schedules, reputation, timing. Her tone was polite enough to pass for kindness. Then she folded her hands. So, you're carrying my son's child, Mrs. Lee said. Zuri's breath caught. At the time Lee Tae-kyu had said it, it wasn't true. But now it was. He didn't know it yet. This does not make you family, Mrs. Lee continued evenly. It makes you a problem that must be managed. Zuri's fingers curled in her lap, her brows furrowing. A problem? I'm not asking for anything. That, Mrs. Lee said, is what makes you dangerous. The words landed heavy. You don't belong in this world, Mrs. Lee went on. And I will not allow my first grandchild to be brought by. Zuri lifted her chin, her eyes narrowing. By what? By a black woman? I have no problem with your ethnicity, Mrs. Lee replied. You're not qualified to be with my son. This is the truth. Even if he loves me? Zuri asked. Mrs. Lee let out a scoff. What is love? Has Tae-kyu ever said those words to you? Zuri glanced at the table, her lips pressing as she remained silent. I thought as much, Mrs. Lee continued. It may not look like much, but I'm helping you, so name your price. Zuri's heart pounded as she stared in shock. I am not for sale, she stated, finality in her tone. Mrs. Lee shook her head as she let out a tired smile. You know, accidents happen when people refuse to listen. Zuri stood to her feet. I'm not going to stay here and listen to your threats. It's not a threat, Mrs. Lee cut in. I don't care, Zuri said. I'm leaving. Thank you for the meal, ma'am. Zuri walked down the streets of Seoul, her mind ravaged with many thoughts. It was difficult to run away, and it was also difficult to let Tae-kyu know and allow him decide. But what would be easy for her and the baby? She came to the conclusion that she would have to feel out Lee Tae-kyu. Did he want a child just to deter his mother and his planned marriage? Or did he want a child with her? Because maybe he loved her. Zuri came to a stop at the thought.
Love.
It was something she was trying to ignore for weeks, but she had fallen for Tae-kyu long before all this. Shaking her head, she glanced around and crossed the road. The impact came immediately. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The world spun violently sideways. Pain followed, sharp, blinding, immediate. And then it was gone. Zuri woke to the noise of hospital smells and beeping. Her brows furrowed as the sound of fear disguised as whispers reached her in her waking state. Lower your voice. Do you know whose family this is?
Yes.
The Lees. Look, we shouldn't be talking about this. Zuri squinted her eyes and looked at the nurses around her. They said it was an accident. One of the nurses said, They always say that. It doesn't make it true. The words settled cold and heavy. Once again, the reality of Tae-kyu's world settled in her mind as she fell back to sleep. Later, when everywhere was quiet, Zuri stared at the ceiling in deep thought. It wasn't Lee Tae-kyu she was afraid of. It was the world around him. His mother's earlier words of threat rang in her ears. Accidents happen when people refuse to listen. Zuri glanced at her hospital gown, her bandaged hands and feet, her belly. Thank God, her baby was safe. With that, she made a decision. She left that night. With her bag. No phone. No note. She slid out through the service stairwell, one hand pressed protectively to her stomach, every step deliberate. This wasn't running. It was choosing. Lee Tae-kyu arrived at the hospital later that evening, his heart pounding. But something felt wrong as he approached the private room. Where is she? He asked, not needing to explain who he was or who he was looking for. She discharged herself. A nurse said finally. Early. He stepped into the private room, despite her words. The bed was empty. Sheets smoothed too neatly.
No bag.
No note. Not even a cup left half-finished. It was as if she had erased herself on purpose. His chest tightened. How long ago? He asked. Hours. He stood there longer than necessary, staring at the place she should have been, listening to the hum of machines that no longer mattered. For the first time in his life, he was at a loss. His control slipped and panic set in. And he had no idea how to put everything in its bend anything back into place. Back at the estate, he tore through her room with methodical urgency. The closet.
Drawers.
Bathroom. Nothing. No sign of where she would flee. How could she leave all her belongings and just disappear? He wondered. Then he opened the smallest pouch at the back of a bag. The pregnancy test stared back at him. Positive. His breath left him in a slow, stunned exhale as the meaning landed fully, painfully clear. A child. His child in her. Lee Tae-kyu's brow furrowed as anger rose within him. Then why did she flee? Zuri wasn't a woman who was full of fears. Lee Tae-kyu knew that. He understood every part of her even though he never said it. So he knew there had to be a different reason. He started by investigating the road accident, and the truth followed quickly once he knew what to look for. He traced Zuri's last pathway, watched the CCTV, noticed the car following her on her way to a meeting with his mother. Then he looked at phone records. Security logs. Timing that lined up too cleanly to be chance. His cousin's name surfaced again and again. Rage came, sharp and cold, but it didn't consume him. Not this time. He confronted his mother. Demanded a CCTV view from the restaurant even though they claimed it was switched off. His mother's words, threats dressed in layers of advice. Zuri's shocked face. The way she cradled her stomach. The question she didn't answer. About love. Though he never said it, he had given her everything he thought she needed. And maybe that was the problem. Days blurred into weeks. The search for Zuri spread wider, then thinned. Leads dried up. Cities turned into names on lists, then into nothing at all. He never stopped searching, but he started to believe more. That one day, both of them would find themselves. And so he waited. It was the hardest thing he had ever learned to do. 5 months later, Tae-kyu was passing a small pastry shop on a quiet street in Busan when a familiar scent stopped him cold.
He turned.
And there she was. For a second, Tae-kyu couldn't move. Zuri stood behind the counter, flour on her fingers, hair pulled back carelessly. Her body was round with life, the undeniable, unmistakable presence that she was pregnant. The sight struck him so hard his breath stuttered. He entered the shop and she looked up. Recognition flashed through her eyes, and then fear. "No," she whispered, taking a step back. Tae-kyu didn't waste any time. He approached the counter even as she backed away. "Zuri," he called, "you've been here all this time?" "You shouldn't be here," she said, one hand already at her stomach.
Please.
"Just go." "I won't," he said, his voice tight with desperation. "I can't. Not without you." Her eyes hardened.
No. You don't get to decide that.
That came out wrong. He stopped a few steps away, careful. "I'm not here to take you away forcefully. But Zuri, I've been looking over for you. Why did you leave without any word? Why did you hide from me?" "I was scared. I hid from your world, Tae-kyu." "Not you," Zuri answered after a while. "My accident wasn't an accident, was it? I won't let my child be hurt because of a power struggle. And I won't let my child grow up without me." Zuri lifted her chin. "And if I don't agree, what are you going to do? Hurt me?" Silence stretched between them, brittle and loud. "I could never. I miss you, Zuri. I prayed night and day to find you. Alive and well. I can protect you. Let me prove that." She laughed once, short and sharp. "You think saying that fixes anything? First the poison, then the accident. What next? Nothing. Everything has changed. My world will never put you or my child in danger again. It's handled." Zuri shook her head as she pressed her lips together. She wanted to run into his arms. Any sure they were safe. It had been so hard to build from scratch. Then, carrying a child alone was so heavy, and she yearned for rest. "It's all right," he said. "I'll show you that I meant that. Just promise me you won't hide from me again." "I promise." With that, Tae-kyu left. But he came back the next day. And the day after that. He waited outside, walked her home when she allowed it. And slowly, conversations began to flow. Laughter seeped into their conversation, and once again, she let him in. Weeks passed, and Zuri was back in the estate. Tae-kyu had explained that his mother wasn't responsible for the accident. He had showed her proof of the real mastermind, his jealous cousin and rival who believed getting rid of her would hurt him. Now, she was 8 months pregnant, and Tae-kyu had forbidden his mother from coming to the estate for her sake. It didn't sit well with her, so Zuri had asked for one more chance with his mother. Maybe she would finally accept her. His mother arrived once, elegant as ever, and stopped when she saw Zuri seated in the dining room, heavily pregnant. Tae-kyu joined them. Lunch commenced and silence reigned as they all focused on their food. "The kimchi tastes different," Mrs. Lee spoke after lunch was done. "It was nice. Thank you, Mother." Tae-kyu said. "Zuri prepared it." "What?" Mrs. Lee snapped her head toward Zuri. "In fact, she prepared all the dishes here by hand. I already told her she didn't need to push herself so much, but she insisted." Zuri looked at Mrs. Lee, who was still staring at her. "It was nothing," Zuri said. "I'm more concerned that he let you cook while you're close to your due date. Is he not aware that you need rest? Like he said, I wanted to cook all these. It's a habit of mine." Mrs. Lee nodded once and dabbed her lips with a napkin. "The accident wasn't my doing," she said after a while. "My nephew acted alone. I wasn't privy to his plans. My words that day. I wanted to see if you would stay if you were pushed to a corner. You were testing me.
Yes.
The Leaf family needs strong-headed, stubborn, and powerful women. And I'm not referring to material things only. I understand. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the trees. Mrs. Lee brows arched. What do you mean? You and Tae-kyu. You both have a funny way of showing affection. A laugh slipped from Mrs. Lee's lips. I guess we do. I raised him hard and well. The atmosphere became lighter as conversations flowed. Without any words spoken, Zuri could sense the change. She was accepted, and the tense air between mother and son had finally dissolved. Labor came before Zuri expected it. The hospital room buzzed with urgency, then narrowed to breath and pain and hands gripping sheets. Lee Tae-kyu hovered uselessly, pale and shaking. Sit, his mother snapped from beside him, outside the labor room. You're embarrassing yourself. He ignored her. When the cry finally filled the room, sharp and alive, he sagged like a man unmade. The baby was a boy. Zuri held him first, tears streaking her face. Then she looked up. Come here, she said, signaling for him. Lee Tae-kyu took his son with trembling hands, the weight of him rewriting everything he thought he knew about strength. Later, when the room was quiet and the world felt new, he brushed a kiss into Zuri's hair. I won't make you run again, he said. I'll protect you both with my life and everything within me, he swore. And Zuri believed him, a tired, content smile bracing her lips. If this story moved you, leave a heart in the comments so we know you stayed with us to the end. Like and subscribe for more life tale moments. Your support and presence means